Here's the Nokia E7, the new E-series flagship, targeted at enterprises but of course with a consumer interest as well. The main event on this device is of course the QWERTY keyboard. We'll come back to that later, and we'll start with a look around the device itself. On the left hand side here we've got the usual slider lock switch. On the top edge here you've got the micro USB port that also doubles as charging and for USB on the go functionality. Then we have the HDMI out port, that's 720p, the power button and the 3.5mm audio jack. This can also be used for TV out, although that's at standard resolutions with composite cables. On the right hand side of the device we've got the SIM card slot there, that's slot loading, the volume rocker key and the camera capture key. All of the buttons around the side of the device are of high quality. Indeed, this whole E7 is beautifully designed, the build quality is outstanding, and I think this is one of the best pieces of industrial design that Nokia have ever produced. Having a quick look on the back of the device here, we can find the 8-megapixel EDOF camera. EDOF is an interesting technology. It's neither fixed focus nor autofocus. Indeed, what happens is pictures taken with it are in focus all the time thanks to some clever behind-the-scenes algorithms. The benefits of using EDOF is you get a much smaller camera module, which means you can make a thinner phone. The E7 certainly benefits from that. If it had an autofocus unit in it, it would be a much thicker device. That said, this camera doesn't always produce the best results when you're taking macro or close-up shots. A bit annoying when you want to scan in a document or capture something quickly. It's one of the trade-offs that's inherent in any smartphone design. You'll also notice here that the aluminium shell around the outside is all in one. There's no battery cover, so the battery isn't removable. However, it's a fairly decent size at 1350 mAh, and it does seem to get through a day in the testing we've done so far. It's very similar to the N8 in that regard, and better than most smartphones in this category on the market. Just a few other things to note on the back here. There's the speaker grill. It's a mono speaker, but it's pretty loud. There's also there's an extra microphone down here, which is used in noise cancelling, which gives the E7 excellent call quality. Returning to the front of the device, we see this gorgeous 4-inch AMOLED capacitive touch screen. It also uses Nokia's clear black display technology that rearranges the elements of the screen matrix in order to increase colour vibrancy, particularly in the blacks, giving a more accurate rendition, and perhaps more importantly, reducing the number of reflections. That's particularly important in outside conditions where bright light sometimes obscures other screens. I would say the E7 screen is as good as anything else you'll find on the market at the moment, and a significant step up from some of Nokia's early devices, things like the N8 or the N97. Also on the front here you'll notice the home screen button. That's also used for multitasking, and on the top just next to the E7 label there's proximity and ambient light sensors, and in the middle here there's a VGA camera for video calling. As I suggested earlier, the main hardware point of the E7 is of course the landscape QWERTY keyboard. This is accessed by pressing downwards and slightly inwards here, and that which does take some getting used to, but once you master it, it's very easy and rather elegant. You can even do this with a single thumb, and you can let the phone do most of the work thanks to the sprung hinges. In the early prototypes of the E7, this mechanism was rather stiff, but I'm glad to say in this retail unit it's much improved. The mechanism itself leaves the screen at about a 27-degree angle, ideal either for holding in the hands like this or sitting on the desk. You can see there's a support mechanism on the back here, which actually doubles as a rather useful finger rest when you're holding the phone in this kind of orientation, as you can see. Talking of which, these are the two main ways you can type on the device: the thumbboard style like this, or sitting it on the desk and touch typing. The touch typing will get you faster speeds, but it's not usable in a mobile context, and of course you need a flat surface. Even with this thumbboard style, I would have thought most people can get up to 30 or even 40 words per minute with a bit of practice. One of the things I did like about the E7 keyboard is it has a shallow learning curve. Anybody should be able to pick this up and start entering text without any problem and get up to a healthy speed. That's rather in contrast with some of the on-screen keyboards, which sometimes take a bit of practicing to get up to decent speeds. In terms of the keyboard itself, I would say this is one of the best that Nokia has ever produced, and one of the best I've seen on a mobile device. The individual keys themselves look quite small and chiclet-like, but actually have pretty good tactile feedback. There's a very definite sense of down and up motion when you press into them. You can also see that all the tricks have been used in typical layout sense. There's also, if you hold a long press on any of these keys, you get the secondary punctuation up. Because this E7 is a bigger device thanks to its 4-inch screen than say something like the N8 or the N97 Mini, that Nokia managed to squeeze in a 4-row keyboard, and this does make a big difference as you get a more standard layout. Notably the spacebar is centered, but you also have these arrow keys which are very useful when editing text but are also helpful when navigating around the phone's UI. The idea of these hybrid devices, i.e. both touchscreen and QWERTY, I think is probably the most usable of all form factors. It gives you a best of both worlds, albeit at something of a size cost. Because the E7, well yes, it is a big device. Let's just bring in a couple of devices to do some size comparisons here. Here you can see the N8. You'll notice that the E7 is bigger. That's actually mainly down to the 4-inch screen. In terms of thickness, the E7 is almost exactly the same as the N8. It is in fact 0.4mm thicker, but thanks to the N8's camera hump, you'll not really notice this, and the N8, when sat on the desk, actually looks a bit thicker. Similarly, bringing in something like the Nokia C7, you can see here this is really the contrast between the typical slab phone of 3.5-inch screen and this phone, which is a hybrid QWERTY with a 4-inch screen, and here there is a bigger difference. But of course the E7 is also the successor to the Nokia communicators, and they were also always known as rather brick-like phones, but I think the E7 rather does away with that designation. You can see here that the E7 looks bigger, and again it's thanks to the screen, but when you turn it on the side you can see the real difference here. It's not quite half the thickness, but it's not far off, and of course the two mechanisms, I think the E7 is but comfortably more elegant in this orientation. If we go even further back to the Nokia 9500 here, you can see you get up to another size altogether, and although the keyboard is bigger here, I would say it's very similar in speed terms to the E7 here. The Nokia E7 runs on Symbian 3. This is a well-known quantity now thanks to the N8, C7 and C601. There's plenty of features to talk about, and we'll see some of these in the applications as we go through this review. Looking at the home screen, for example, we've got the 3-page home screen with the interactive widgets. You've got the standard application launcher. Symbian 3 receives a lot of criticism for not being competitive. Some of this criticism is ill-informed. Saying it's slow just isn't really true anymore, and saying it's out of date really misses the point. I think the thing with Symbian 3 is that for some markets it's not competitive, notably the US, but elsewhere where Symbian is more established, it's going to do just fine. I've said before that Symbian 3 isn't necessarily going to attract new users to Nokia, but it certainly should do a good job of retaining existing ones. If you're familiar with Symbian, you'll find Symbian 3 a big step forward. The graphics engine, the faster processors and the extra RAM mean things run much more smoothly and at a faster pace. Notably, the touch interaction is much improved, finger touch throughout with single taps and context-sensitive menus. Now let's take a closer look at some of the applications running on this phone. Starting with that most ubiquitous of enterprise software, email. You can see here I'm running Mail for Exchange, accessing through a widget on the home screen. It uses the same client as Nokia Messaging, which is also available on this phone for consumer email addresses. Mail for Exchange is of course the implementation of the Microsoft Exchange client. It's fairly standard as you'd expect. I think performance is pretty good. Here you can see we're accessing an HTML email. If you want to, there's capacitive touch, multi-touch for zooming in and out. Replying, etc. is no problem, and of course you can also sync your contacts and calendar using Exchange. If you want a more detailed look at this, have a look at some of the content on All About Symbian where we explore this in more detail. Going back to the home screen here, you can see that I've got a SIP service activated on the phone. That's voice over IP with SIP-gate in this instance, but you can configure it to any service you like. This allows you to make calls over Wi-Fi, and particularly for business allows end-to-end communication implementations. It's completely integrated into the phone, so if you use contacts or the standing calling features, it will work just fine. You can even set it as a standard calling mechanism, avoiding your operator altogether. It works over both Wi-Fi and 3G. Here's Ovi Maps running on the E7. No real surprises, it's version 3.4. You can upgrade to version 3.6, currently in beta via Beta Labs, which just gives some extra functionality. It's really a well-known quantity here, with the free sat-nav, location services and mapping offering being one of Nokia's service crown jewels. It does run very smoothly on the E7, which speaks well to the processor, RAM and general performance of the phone. There's the usual search functionality as well as, of course, all the associated things like weather, integration with TripAdvisor and other location services, free guides for Michelin, and of course the all-important free navigation element for both driving and walking. Here's the browser on the Nokia E7. It's the same as that found on the N8, and this is one area where Nokia arguably lags behind some of its competition. It's mainly around performance. It uses an older version of WebKit and can be particularly slow with JavaScript pages. That said, it's still a reasonable browser, and as you can see here, it's quite easy moving around even bigger web pages, and there's support for pinch to zoom, so you can easily get around even the biggest of web pages. There's also support for Flash. You can see here our podcast player, but as I say, it is perhaps a little behind the competition here. Nokia are expecting to introduce a new web browser in the software update, and the E7 will no doubt benefit from that as much as the other Symbian 3 phones. Here's the Photos application, again fairly standard. You can use this to view photos either loaded on the phone or captured with a camera, and of course there's multi-touch support for zooming in and out of photos. Support for video playback on the E7 is very good indeed. There's a wide range of codecs supported, including H.264, XVID and DivX. Of course, when you're playing back, you can use the HDMI out port on the top here, so you can plug into a flat screen TV or indeed any other HDMI input capable device. Here's the Ovi store running on the Nokia E7. This is where you can download additional games and applications. Other applications include all the standard Nokia Symbian applications, calendar, contacts, messaging. One thing of note is that the Office folder has been promoted out of the Applications folder onto the front screen and have the number of third-party software titles bundled with it, the most important of which is Quick Office, which allows you to view and edit Microsoft Office documents. You can see here an example of a Word document being loaded, but it also supports Excel and PowerPoint presentations in view-only mode. Going back to that Office folder, we can see that there's also an Adobe PDF reader as well as the standard zip thing for viewing files that you receive in email attachments, the File Manager Dictionary. Going back to the Applications folder, you can also see there's more standard applications, Clock, SW Update for getting updates on the phone, Search, a powerful search utility for both content on the phone and on the web. Also notable in a multimedia context are the photo and video editor. There's a couple of games bundled with the phone, including Ovi Maps Challenge and Climate Mission. So, concluding thoughts on the E7? Well, it's really all about the Symbian 3 device family and choice. You've also got the C601, the C7 and the N8. Taking these four devices together, Nokia is offering a choice of hardware, specification and price options, and you need to choose the one that's most suited to you. The E7 is clearly marketed as an enterprise device but does have consumer appeal as well. As we said, the hardware is really outstanding. This is Nokia's industrial design expertise demonstrated in the best possible manner. On the software side, Symbian 3 is a known option, an anathema to some, but a real boon to others. The compromises made in the E7's design, for example, the camera we talked about earlier, but also the missing micro SD card slot and no FM transmitter, will put some off, but really that's been achieved as a result of design constraints. If you started adding hardware back into this phone, it would become a lot thicker and therefore would put some people off. You may not agree with the balance that Nokia has struck, but there are other device options available. The E7 serves a more productivity range, enterprise focused if you will, and I think it does stand out, especially from the slew of touch slates that we have in the smartphone world. Something in this hybrid device form factor with a tilted screen and this excellent QWERTY keyboard does offer something a bit different. In that sense, it's really rather like the old communicators, standing apart a little bit from the rest of the market, even if it is perhaps not a mainstream popular device. That said, I have no doubt that the E7 is going to find many new fans.